So moving on, 6.2, iOS Conference Bridge, provision the corporate headquarter router 1 to support one conference bridging session, enable all codecs supported by the PVDM2 C5510 chipset while still allowing support for a 16-participant conference. Okay, so first of all, we were told to enable all codecs supported by this chipset. Well, we know that we have PVDMs because we did a show inventory. We know that we have a PVDM2. It doesn't really tell us which chipset we have. We can see that by doing a show voice DSP, detailed, I believe. And here it shows the DSP type. So first of all, I can scroll up just a little bit. Here we go. We've got the Voice Flex 0 DSP voice channels. None are being used. We've got a legend. First of all, the current state and a legend. So busy is in use. B-out is busy out. So we actually busied out DSP. Depend is a busy out that's pending. Bad, well, that equals bad. Shut equals shut down. And depend is actually the DSP download pending and upgrade. Okay, so there are versions to the DSPs. In fact, anyone that's worked in the voice field long enough and dealt with any issues regarding DSPs, there have certainly been iOS versions for the routers that contain DSP firmware that those inherently contain, well, we like to call them features, right? But contain different issues. But the latest, and actually has been for quite a while, is fairly stable. So notice this DSP type, we've got the C5510 chipset, the DSP number. Okay, so DSP1 all the way on down to here, those are all the first DSP, the first physical chip that we showed the example of. But notice, okay, so those are all chip 1, and then that third column, channel 1 through 16, counting non-canonically. Okay, then we have chip 2, channel 1, down through, oops. So chip 2, channel 1, down through 216, and then our third chip, channel 1, down through 16, and their state, version, everything else. Okay, so that's one show command we can do in order to determine the actual chipset. So let's go ahead and provision the conference bridge. So again, how do we know which codecs are supported by that chipset? Well, the SRND tells us, and we have the SRND in the lab. So even if we were given a task as sinister as this one, not really sinister, but just actually asking you to know a good bit about the hardware, or even if you don't know, use the resources available. By the way, just necessarily knowing all of the information that there is to know about anything related to voice, that is nice if you can remember it all, but that's not really what being a CCIE is about, or even passing the lab. Being resourceful, and you hear me say this a number of times throughout the deep dive modules, being resourceful, that's really what being a CCIE is about. And you have these resources to give you the information about what you need in the lab. You just have to know where to look, and the only way you'll know where to look is if you've looked there before, hopefully studied them. You'll know where to look. So anyway, so now we want DSP farm profile, call it number 2, or conference bridging. Okay, we could have security, but we're not going to do that here. Now, no resource, note, check voice card or DSP service is not configured. All right? So it tells us right away. In fact, it let us, let's just go back into it. It let us go into this. Do show run pipe 2 section DSP farm profile 2. Well, let's look at all of them. It let us create the conference, but currently it said max conference participants is 0. And if we do maximum sessions, notice there's no hardware or software verbiage here like there was with MTP. That's because it has to be hardware. And 0 is all that's available. Again, that's because we don't have voice dash card 0 DSP services. Remember there were two commands here, DSP farm, which is actually called DSP pooling, and we do not need to turn that on in this case for any reason. Only if we're using DSP resources between network modules or between slots. Everything we have is on slot 0, the motherboard. So DSP services, we're not going to deal with any DSP TDM configuration, or for trunking. DSP services, DSP farm. Now we can go back into that DSP farm profile for 2, and now we can say maximum sessions, and we've got sessions available. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, David, about being able to use the software MTP without configuring any DSPs for the task. Yep, you're raising your hand. Let me mute my mic. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was meant to just agree. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no problem. Okay, and we'll take a look at how many were we told? We were told to provision it for 1 conference bridging session. Okay, so if I say maximum sessions 1, am I saying only 1 participant can be live in the conference? Well, that doesn't make sense. That's not a conference. 2 people is not a conference either. It takes 3 to really make a conference. So maximum sessions 1 is 1 session. How many participants per session? Well, let's take a look. We have not just max sessions, but max conference participants. Now we note that we have 8 or 16 are the 2 values we can use. Codec is G729. 8 or 16 participants are allowed. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Do show run pipe to section DSP farm profile 2. Currently, now remember when we did the show command earlier, before we enabled the voice card, that the conference showed max conference participants 0, shutdown, and no codecs, because we had not provisioned DSP services, DSP farm, hadn't told the DSPs they could be used for that function. Once we did, even while it's still shut down, it now by default supports G711 MULAW and ALAW, G729, AR8, ABR8, R8, and BR8. Again, the A variant is what the phones default to. So we were told to use to support 1 conference bridging session for all codecs supported by this chipset while still allowing for a 16 participant conference. But what about codec G722? Do we have that available? We don't even have that available. I'm sorry, it is there. Why wasn't I able to key it in? Okay. However, as we read before, the chipset doesn't actually support it. PVDM3s do. Okay, so we can't enable that one. What about codec ILBC? First of all, the chipset doesn't support it, but if we did put it in, it tells us we have to say no max sessions 1, then put the codec in, then say max sessions 1, and then when we say maximum conference participants, notice that because the codec is ILBC, that's the least common denominator, 8 participants is the maximum that we can do. Okay, we were told to make sure we could support 16 participants, and the ILBC isn't even supported for that. No max sessions 1, no codec ILBC, max sessions 1, and maximum conference participants 16. Oh, we can't do that until we say no max sessions 1. Go, maximum sessions 1, do show run pipe 2 section DSP farm, file 2. Okay, so the default was 8. We know it's the default because it doesn't show up. 16 is not the default because it shows up. So now we can say, first of all, we need to associate it to an application, which is Skinny. and then no shut it. Now, before we can go any further, we have to go back and do show. Now notice this took DSP number 3 in slot 0 and changed it to up. So it essentially reserved that DSP. So now do show run, type to section skinny or DSP farm. And we have to go back into our skinny group and go back and register, actually associate profile 2 and register it as a corporate headquarter router hardware conference bridge. Call it whatever we want. Maybe that's too many characters. Yep, that was too many characters. So call it whatever we want up to, I think 16 characters. Okay, so probably best to do no SCCP and SCCP. And actually, we might even want to do that after we go and configure this in the CUCM server. So now back on CUCMA, we have to go to Conference Bridge. Whoops, I clicked on Enunciator. And we note that we already have 2 conference bridges. Let's rename these. This is .10, so that's the pub. So we can make good sense of them later. Set them as we go along. And the sub. And this will need to be a part of the device pool headquarter because it's at the headquarter site. And reset. I'm resetting them here in this other window. The reason we have to reset them on this page, we didn't reset MTP, but we should have, is because here we can't check them and click reset from here. So add new, and we will create our Cisco iOS Enhanced Conference Bridge, which note goes from MAC address to name. Okay, we want to put it in the proper device pool for where it's at, and the proper location is going to deal with call and mission control. Device security mode is non-secure, and we're not using a trusted relay point to access this conference bridge. Save, reset. Back out here. If it's not registered, we'll pop back over here and do no SCCP and SCCP and show SCCP, and we see that it's registered with the sub, so it should show up here proper as well, and it does.